From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Thanks for listening to the Wildcast podcast. I'm Justin Spears alongside Michael Lev and Brett Fera previewing Arizona versus Utah. Nice little top 25 matchup, or top 20, depending on what rankings you're looking at. But we always look at the college football playoff rankings. Those always seems like it's the most important one.
Yeah,
and,
as an AP voter, we just kind of get shuffled to the side once the CFP starts doing their thing. But that's okay. That's all right. People know who the OGs are
for about
in this situation.
40 hours. You're important every week.
Yeah, it's true.
Until
yes,
Tuesday
that
night,
little
from Sunday morning to Tuesday night, things are good.
Yeah, that little gap between when the AP rankings come out at like noon Sunday, and then the official and important ones come out Tuesday. So I think mine are actually kind of closer to the CFP rankings, which worries me a little bit. I don't like to. I like to be my own independent thinker when it comes to the rankings.
Well, I'm wondering with James Madison and their whole situation.
Yeah.
Do you rank them? Like, do you pay attention to them?
Yeah, I rank them.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't adhere to those rules regarding like if they're bowl eligible or
they're not ranked in the CFP.
Correct. Oh. Yeah, because they're not eligible for a bowl. They might end up in a bowl because a lot of teams are careening towards 5 and 7 or worse seasons, including a couple that we're going to talk about when we do our Pac-12 pick segment.
Yeah.
So James Madison and Jacksonville State might end up in bowl games because there aren't enough 6-6 teams to fill all the slots. But the NCAA turned down their request for a waiver to get in the other day.
I still think they should rank them and then just not put them in and go to the next team if that's necessary. I mean, it reminds me of, I'm trying to think of when else this happened, but I'm thinking
USC?
of Auburn in the mid-90s with, who was it, Terry Bowden was the coach there, and they went like 11-0-1 or 10-0-1 and were fourth in the country, but they were ineligible for a bowl game. Yeah. And so that was pre-BCS, pre-college football playoff, but it's important to rank because in people's minds, even though the playoff committee, I'm assuming, is supposed to separate and say, look at the body of work and, look at what's up ahead for them and stuff. We all hear things like, who's the third team? Texas, Alabama, and Arizona are the only teams to beat 3 ranked teams. Like, you hear that stuff. And if James Madison's not ranked, then it doesn't count. Like, I know that they are not necessarily playing that type of schedule. But my point is, though, I think it's important that we recognize that they're a good team. So if there was a top 7 team that was ineligible, Michigan in the next week or so, they should still be ranked because that.
Or how about this? Like, they always talk about at the end, like, oh, they have X number of games or wins against top 25 teams, and they're excluding a good team.
Exactly.
From
That's
the
exactly
list.
my point. Said way better than I could.
For reasons beyond their control.
Well, and the Michigan point is a good one. If 2 weeks ago they would have decided Michigan's ineligible, Michigan would still be a top 5 team in the country.
Yeah.
They're just ineligible for a bowl game. Mm-hmm. So if Ohio State beats them or someone else beats them.
And for that to not count?
For those
really
wins
unfair.
to not count as big wins when you're looking at. I mean, then they probably do in the subconscious of the voters. But this is where I get to say for 8 seconds, if you guys humor me, death to the college football playoff. I am a BCS homer. Have been forever. The formula was never the problem. It was that it was only 2 teams. That's where I
Yeah, I
will die on that.
I don't want to divert our attention too much to this, but I am anti 12 teams. I don't know why they went from 4 to 12. Like,
I'm pro.
I would have been 6, would have been fine. 8, I think, is like the perfect number.
Yeah,
you just sort of your Power 5 or Power 4, one group of 5, and the rest are at large. And there still seems like the stakes are huge, but I don't know. They decided to go to 12. Strange.
But I feel like even if we get to 12, people are still going to find a way to complain. Right?
Yeah,
it's like, now that's 12 teams, you're putting in, 4 SEC teams, 5 SEC teams, and that shouldn't be the case.
Another reason I don't like it.
There's always going to be complaining, no matter what.
And I don't know. I feel like it dilutes the regular season product a little bit. But anyway, that's not really what we're here to talk about, is it, Justin?
We're here to talk about Arizona, Utah,
yeah,
guys. And got a big one on Saturday. It's the final home game of the season, and it's Senior Day. Also Military Appreciation Day, so a lot of things going into this game. And it's an afternoon game. How about that? Albeit it is on Pac-12 Network, so a little difficult to access for all you Pac-12 fans. I do find it very, very comical that what could be the very last live broadcast on Pac-12 networks features Notre Dame at later on in the afternoon. Last football game, yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, this is going to be an afternoon game on Pac-12 networks. A busy day in Tucson that day too. You also have El Tour de Tucson going on in downtown Tucson, so plan accordingly, all you Arizona fans.
9 p.m. men's basketball game the night before, so not just a busy day, but a busy 18 hours.
And the women play in the Bahamas
at
the same time the football game's going on. So yeah,
wow.
It's going to be fun.
So
it's going to be a fun day Saturday. How about
men's the football game will be on 1290 and 107.5. The women's basketball game will be on 1400. There was this whole big thing made this season about the women's basketball team moving to 1290 for radio for the first time. So a better signal and kind of the flagship Wildcats radio. Not allowed to talk about in front of your presence, but no.
Shame,
Brett.
Just joking. Talk about the other guys.
But 3 out of the first 4 games have had to be back on 1400 because they're either matched up with men's basketball games or football.
Yeah.
So, not that needs much, but just interesting.
Interesting.
Fodder.
A lot of things going on in Tucson, but this game on Saturday, it's a big one, and I think that this will be a huge test for Arizona once again. Another battle against a ranked opponent, and it's a team that this team has really struggled against over the last several years because they expose everything that Arizona wasn't good at, which is stopping the run. Winning the trench battle, the guys on the line of scrimmage. Now Arizona can say, no, we've done a pretty good job of patching up those areas. As a matter of fact, we're one of the best teams in that department. I think the Oregon State game was a perfect, I wouldn't say a tune-up game because there's a possibility that Oregon State is better than Utah. At least they're higher in the rankings. But I think that game against Oregon State a couple of weeks ago really gives them a good advantage. At least they know what to expect when they go up against Utah because the Utes, they run the ball a lot, they have really good lines, and they use a lot of tight ends. The Oregon State game is probably as close to the matchup you're going to get when the Wildcats face Utah.
It's a template, right?
Template, yep.
And I think it was who made reference. Oh, it was Jacob Manu earlier this week. Someone asked him, who does Utah remind you of? And he said Oregon State. So Arizona was able to survive that game. They won 27-24. Even though the scorebook said it was 14-14 in the fourth quarter, Arizona actually kind of controlled things in the fourth quarter. Oregon State scored right at the start of the period and right at the end. But the middle of that quarter was when Arizona took control of the game. They turned it from what was it? 17 to 13. Then they were up 27-17, and then Oregon State scored late. So we've seen this pattern with this team. Very impressive. The second half, they have been owning the second half. They did it again against Colorado. Greg Hansen wrote about it. Brett, it was like the perfect fourth quarter. And it's sort of a cliche, fourth quarter, 4's up, whatever. Yep. But it really does. I mean, a lot of these games, will come down to the last couple possessions. And if you can do all the right things in those situations and you have depth, which Arizona suddenly has now for the first time in a really long time, legit depth on defense, played 23, maybe 24 players against Colorado on defense. That's unheard of.
Yep.
We always talked about this. Coaches, they would always say, oh, yeah, we're going to have a rotation. We're going to have this and that. And then it never happened. It was BS, frankly. It was just, campaign promises that went unfulfilled. They finally have it, and it's showing up in a big way down the stretch of the season and down the stretch in these games.
I was thinking about this. I said it to Lev kind of, and, one of the favorite people we've written about and had in the Daily Star's pages this year, talked about him a lot this year, Raymond Polito, who hasn't played a ton. I know you've kind of been on top of that. When is he going to get action? And to Lev's point, that's a prime example of something that could have been a major hole for this team. But it wasn't, because they not just are able to cycle in rotations, but they have depth everywhere. And it's absolutely shown. And it's, they told us that in the summer, that there was going to be depth and there was going to be the ability to cycle different guys at different roles. And to your point, we can believe it, but we're actually seeing it. And I think from both situations like that are unforeseen, like a guy who was supposed to play major minutes at a key spot and has barely touched the field, and they haven't missed a beat.
Yeah. And, on the defensive side of the ball, we talk about the turnaround by defensive coordinator Johnny Nansen in year 2. I mean, you talk about the rushing defense, how they went from one of the worst, not only in the Pac-12, but in college football. They had the 8th worst rushing defense in college football. Now you look at them, the 13th best defense. I mean, that is one of the most biggest turnarounds I have ever seen. And that we're talking about a team that went from a team that couldn't really score the ball or move the ball down the field. Then all of a sudden they had the 6th best passing offense in college football. Now, in year 3 of this whole thing with Jedd Fisch, now the defensive side of the ball has not only become just one of the best overall units, but they got their Achilles heel and they made it their strength in just a 1-year turnaround.
Couldn't we argue that rushing defense is the biggest factor in their record right now? I mean, if you really look at it, the offense is good, but not performing statistically and efficiently like they did last year. I mean, they're efficient, don't get me wrong, but like
better in the red zone, but
sure, yeah,
to your
in
point,
areas better, but
more
the
or less
overall
the
offense
same,
is not running up and down the field sort of like they did last year. And defensively, it took a long time, even though the defensive backs and the nickel backs and stuff have played well, it took a long time to get turnovers in that area and things like that. They're not pushing for 8-9 wins without the rushing defense doing exactly what you just said and moving up 100 spots.
And on top of that,
national rankings.
What impresses me the most about the defensive turnaround is like we're not sitting here talking about like, man, all these interceptions and fumbles they're getting. Like
they're not. They only have 8 takeaways.
They're just forcing teams to kick the ball away.
Yeah.
So against Utah, as detailed in my cat stats this week, the Utes had 306 rushing yards last year when they met, and they have averaged 221.5 yards on the ground over the last 6 games, all won by Utah. Meanwhile, Arizona has averaged only 119.7 yards on the ground. So nearly 2-to-1 edge in rushing yards among many other stats that have gone Utah's way. Another one that I pointed out is field position.
Yeah.
They always seem to control field position. They always have these awesome Australian punters who can either boom the ball or drop it inside the 20. Jack Baumeister is yet another from the Aussie pipeline over there at Utah, and that's how they play. I think we asked the question earlier in the week, Justin, like, can Arizona out Utah? Are they ready? Are they ready for this? Are they ready to play in a street fight type of game? And I think, the Oregon State game showed that they probably are. I think, we'll get to our predictions later, but I think they are ready for this type of game. And it's taken a long time to get to this point.
Well, and, you talk about out Utahing Utah. We asked them, could they out Oregon State a couple weeks ago? Because Oregon State is pretty much like a diet Utah, and I think that they've pretty much modeled how they play and how they've constructed the roster after Utah. And I always go back to the fourth quarter when it was winning time for Arizona, and they were already winning, but then they go and put together like 11 play drive, and they chewed up like 5 minutes and 20 seconds off the clock. Kind of did the same thing against Colorado.
Though it was tied, that's the difference. But yes.
But against Oregon State, like, just ran the ball, punched them in the face, and moved the ball down the field, chewed up over 5 minutes of game clock, and then next thing you know, they're up by 2 possessions. That right there is it's winning football for Arizona. And I would imagine them kind of doing the same thing against Utah. But, as we talked about on radio, Lev, that this Utah team, they're not the same Utah team that we've seen over the last couple of years, meaning that they don't have Cam Rising, who's been out for the season. Bryson Barnes, their pig farming quarterback, he's very athletic, can use his legs when he wants to. He's going to be a challenge. Was it Mekhi Bernard, another guy who's been dealing with injuries, and
Brandon Keith's been out. Yeah, Brandon Keith's been out.
So they've been dealing with injuries at with their star players. Yet here they are, 7-3, still a ranked team, and still one of the top teams in the Pac-12. And this is where Kyle Whittingham and the Utes, this is where they really, kind of hit their fifth gear. They're playing their best ball. So even though you look at the rankings and that Utah isn't as high as Arizona, I still think that this is a game in which I think the Utes could come in and possibly beat the Wildcats.
Yeah. So Utah, in some respects not the same. In some respects they kind of are the same. Like really good in third down defense, best in the country in third down defense, second in the Pac-12 in run defense. Arizona played the team that's first in run defense already, UCLA, and they ran the ball decently. I mean, it was tough at times, and there were definitely breakdowns in the offensive line and kind of more runs for 0 yards than we're accustomed to from this Arizona team. So that's going to be a challenge. If Utah takes away the run game, doesn't let Jonah Coleman go off, and then kind of puts Noah Fifita in a lot of third and long situations, that's challenging right there. They were able to overcome that against UCLA, I think in part because they held UCLA to 10 points.
Yeah. There's a solution for that, though. There's a solution for that.
Yeah? What's that?
It's Michael Wiley, and it's passes that are runs. It's basically using him out of the backfield on early downs. Once you realize early on that they're taking away the actual run, Michael Wiley becomes your guy. Coleman, too, but becomes your guy out of the backfield, catching screen passes on the move and basically turning passes into runs. That has to be the maneuver.
So therefore, then, Michael Wiley's ankle becomes a focal point in this game. Is he able to give you more than he gave you last week when he played, 2 snaps?
Yeah.
One touch, and kind of looked like he looked a little slow, gimpy, whatever, and they took him out. And they've used bubble screens a lot this year, just those ones where Noah catches the ball and right away just boom, fires it out to whether it's Tedero McMillan or Jacob Cowing or Montana Lamonius Craig. That's another way to do exactly what you're talking about, Brett, which is those are essentially run plays that are called pass plays.
We've talked a lot about Noah Fifita's efficiency and his passing completion percentage, and a part of that is the play calling, obviously. I mean, this goes without saying, but because of calls like that, they're putting him in position to make easier throws that still need to be accurate, but that are easier throws that are not as impacted by where the defense is at that moment. What the receiver, whether it's a Jacob Cowing or whether it's a running back on the outside or what have you, does with it to be determined at that point. But he's getting the ball in the hands of the guys to then make the play upfield with, 1 or 2 blockers if it's a true bubble screen or something like that. And so I think that's a part of, it seems like we were talking about this before we started recording today. It seems like everyone's getting credit for Noah Fifita's success except for Noah Fifita. But nevertheless, there is a little bit of that where the choices that are being made offensively is helping in that. And I think you're right. I would expect to see bubble screens play a big role in this game.
We've talked about this earlier, but the ADOT, average depth of target, for both Arizona quarterbacks down this year by about 3 yards from what it's been, or from what it was last year. And that just, they've just kind of changed the offense a little bit in that way. I will say, though, Jed, almost every single press conference references receivers who were open and they didn't see them or hit them. He does that all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a little bit of I'm dialing up these kind of awesome plays and they don't always work out. Jacob Cowing, what's his average per catch this year? It's under 10 yards.
It's very low, yeah.
But he's almost every time it's Jacob was open on the post route or this route or that route, and we just didn't hit him. So those opportunities might be there, and it's that balance, right? It's do you want to take the chance and throw it downfield? I think Jaden DeLora more often than not would take the chance, and Noah Fifita is a little bit more conservative, and they haven't turned the ball over, and that's been a good formula for them.
Cowing's average, so he has 10 touchdowns. It's a career high. 72 catches. He's 13 in 2 weeks plus a bowl game to pass his own career high last year, which led the Pac-12, right? Mm-hmm. 85. He's got 72. 534 yards. 7.4 yards a catch. 2 years ago at UTEP, 69 catches, 1,354 yards, 19.6. So he's pushing a third of his career high in yards per catch. That's not him necessarily. That's not his fault. I mean, the craziest stat for him, though, is his well, I guess it's not that crazy. But his long of the year is 30. That seems short to me.
Yeah.
But that's because
just the way they're utilizing him.
So it's necessary, and it's You could be a 5-win team and have him catching 85 balls and 13 yards a catch and have, 2 other guys in Singer and McMillan on the other side last year, or you can have this and be looking at 9 or 10 wins.
But I feel like what's so mind-boggling to me about all of this is, last year you could say, well, Dorian Singer was taken away from his production. Maybe a little bit of T-Mac. Outside of T-Mac, who else is taken away from Jacob Cowing's production in the past?
I mean, it's not his production. I mean, as Brett said, he's got catches, he's got touchdowns. He's just not doing anything down the field.
Yeah. So he's catching the shorter slants or the shorter outs that are 5 yards, and knowing what he does. We saw it against Stanford on that last drive. I think last drive, the two plays he had, he'll catch a ball at 5 yards and turn it into 8. Yeah. And so, things like that is probably what we're seeing without even realizing it. But I think, they've incorporated the tight end more. The receiving out of the backfield, we've talked about that with Wiley already. That's been huge. So that's part of it, is just, I mean, if you look at the non-receivers, catches for meaning tight end or running backs, we're at almost 70 receptions between tight ends and running backs this year.
Wow.
That's got to be higher than the last couple of years. Has to be.
No doubt.
Name to think about, focus on the other side is Jonah Ellis, veteran defensive end for Utah. He's got 12 sacks this year. That's a lot. 16 total tackles for loss. He's a beast up front. They always have guys along there. Sione Vaki, who's played both ways for them. I just saw that 3 Pac-12 players were nominated for the Horning Award, which I think is I think it's the best two-way player in the country.
Or versatile player.
Most versatile player.
Because Jacob Cowing was up for the Horning.
Okay.
At the start of the year.
Yeah, and Cole Bishop is another star for them, safety. On the offensive side, it's been a mishmash, but they still have LaQuindon Jackson as their leading rusher. Vaki might play there. As you mentioned, Bryson Barnes has kind of stabilized the quarterback situation, but does not a great touchdown to interception ratio, 10-7. His completion percentage is under 60. If Cam Rising were healthy, they'd be a much better team.
Yeah.
No disrespect intended at all to Bryson Barnes, who's a great story and won that USC game for them in dramatic fashion. But Cam Rising is an all Pac-12 caliber player and kind of the leader of that team, and they've missed him.
They use Vaki in Wildcat, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So they get pretty tricky on that side of the ball. Kyle Whittingham's not afraid to throw out some tricks. Okay. Before
can I correct myself on something?
Sure.
Interestingly enough, last year, 83 catches to tight ends and running backs for the season. Now, granted, they've played 2 less games so far, and 75 so far this year. So it's not ridiculously more. Maybe after 9 games, or maybe after 12 games, we'll see it be, I wonder if close to 90.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's kind of interesting.
I don't know if you can do this math on the spot, but are they running fewer plays this year per game? Like, I wonder if the clock, the changes with the clock have impacted things in that regard. They also play, they play pretty slow. They will tempo sometimes, but they're a team that huddles. It's a pretty NFL style, and you get a lot of NFL style scores as a result. Also, to your point earlier, Brett, the offense is not incredibly explosive this year. It's more methodical.
Yeah.
And the scores reflect that. 34 was the most they've had in a while. And have they gone over 40?
Well, yeah.
Have they hit 40 this year?
Well, Arizona?
Justin? Yeah.
USC game. But that's triple overtime.
But that was in triple overtime.
If we're just talking about just straight up regulation,
they kind of end up in the 20s or 30s.
Late 20s.
And they can win those games
20s.
now because the defense is
Arizona
way better.
quarterbacks, so primarily Delora and then a few from Fafita, completed 283 passes. That's not attempts, that's completions last year. 283. This year, with 2 games to go to match that, it's 253. So 15 more a game. He's probably going to get into the 20s, but it's not that much more this year. So they're completing more passes this year, but I'm not seeing it on attempts. But this is wild. Again, only through 10 games. How many attempts do you think opposing teams are averaging passing per game? 25?
Yeah,
something like that. Arizona opponents have only completed 191 passes against the Wildcats last year. Last year was 280. So they're 90 less with 2 games to go. I mean, that's 45 a game to match that. That says something to me, that if they end up 30 or 40 completions less, amortize that out over 12 weeks, you're talking 3 or 4 fewer completions. Average completion is, 8 yards or so?
Yeah.
That's a lot of yards.
Yeah.
Arizona,
that's touchdowns off the board.
You guys aren't going to believe this. Arizona averaged 67.5 plays per game last year. They are averaging 67.5 offensive plays this year. So it is exactly the same number. Where have these catches gone? Where have Dorian Singer's catches gone? T-Mac has a lot more. T-Mac he only had 38 catches or something last season. He's
39,
around
he had 61.
now? Yeah, okay.
But his average has gone down by a smidge.
But Michael Wiley had 36 last year. He's got 21.
Yeah.
McLaughlin had 34. He's got 31. Now, granted, 2 games left, so they're going to surpass those numbers, but not by a ton. It's kind of fascinating that all of Dorian Singer's catches just sort of disappeared into the ether.
And they haven't really appeared at USC either for Dorian, unfortunately.
Well, in the yards, too. I mean, Arizona's not going to hit the 3,800 yards passing it had last year primarily from Delora. It's at about 2,800 right now.
They have more rushing yards per game by about 13 a game.
Rushing yards, yeah.
Ready for picks?
Let's do it.
So we're going to, with a lot of talk this week about the tiebreakers in the Pac-12, we might need our own tiebreaker system because, incredibly enough, after a wild week last week, we all have the exact same record against the spread for the season, 34, 30-1. I had a big bounce back week last week going 5-1. I had been in third place, now obviously tied for first. Justin was 3-3 for the second straight week, just sort of methodically moving the ball up and down the field. And Brett was 2-4, which dropped him out of first place and into this 3-way tie. So that's where things stand. In the overall, in the straight up picks, I'm 54-11. Brett is 51-14. Justin 47-18. Justin definitely goes for more upsets. Yeah. But we'll see what this week looks like. There might be some upsets in the works here. We're starting off Friday night. This is a bowl elimination game. 4-6 Colorado at 4-6 Washington State. The loser will be out of bowl contention. The winner will remain alive ahead of their rivalry game the following week. This game kicks off at 8:30 on Fox Sports 1, and it is in Pullman. And the Cougars are favored by 4 points in this game. I am going to take Colorado to win the game outright. I was impressed with how hard they played last week. They still have a lot of talent on that team. And Washington State is just not the type of team that it's going to just like run the ball down their throats or whatnot. They are just in disarray right now. So I'm going to say that Prime figures out a way to get this done, and they actually win the game outright up in Pullman.
I'm going with the Colorado Buffaloes as well to pull off this win. I loved how the line has been able to bounce back ever since Deion Sanders called them out. I mean, Arizona, they were able to get to Shedeur Sanders a little bit in that second half, but I thought for the most part, considering how bad they've looked all year long and how good Arizona's defensive line has looked, I thought Colorado's offensive line didn't look so bad, at least to the point where you got to go out and shop around for some new guys like Deion Sanders said. So I'm going to go with Colorado keeping their bowl chances alive. I got them winning, setting up for a possible bowl punching game against the Utah Utes next week.
ESPN will take that game,
Yes,
and then Arizona State will end up on Pac-12 networks.
Yep.
I want Arizona State on Pac-12 networks because we possibly have Sabino in a state high school football championship in Phoenix at 6 p.m. Saturday night. So I would love for us to all go from Tempe to Ahwatukee to watch the championship game and pay for hotels for everybody, and like we double dip as all 3 of us plus Kelly, we're all going to be in Tempe next week. I would love to have like a whole contingent cover a state championship team, first one, but we'll see what Sabino does Friday night.
Yeah,
but Sabino's the 4 seed in the 3A tournament, and somehow that state championship is Saturday night, the same day ASU plays Arizona in Greater Phoenix.
Fascinating.
Just on the outside of Tempe, Ahwatukee area.
Okay.
So. Don't know why.
Are you jumping off the Washington State bandwagon finally?
Okay, so
Brett.
I was going to say, so I'm going to lead into the next game as well with this because it all correlates. Our two, are we doing the Arizona game last?
Yeah, we'll do it.
Oh, okay, never mind then. I'm going on the list that was provided, so I guess I can't do that. I'll tease to my Arizona-Utah pick, though, because it works with this. Look, I love – Justin has been in sports talk radio for a long time. This isn't exactly sports talk, but it's kind of the same thing. I love that you can say something one week and then it just disappears out of the ether. But I'll admit that, 6 weeks ago, I was talking about Washington State as a national championship potential team. I was talking about Washington State for the Apple Cup for the Pac-12 championship. But, man, I don't know what happened. I mean, I do know it
Arizona
happened.
broke them.
Well, that's my point. I think Colorado is going to beat Washington State. I don't think Arizona broke Colorado. I think how Colorado played was probably – oddly, and this is not me being a homer to Arizona, it's going to sound like it, but I thought I was more impressed with how Colorado played in a loss to Arizona than most of their games, including many of their wins.
Great call. Yep.
And I think Colorado wins, no questions asked. And I think Colorado beats Utah next week to get to a bowl game. I think that, and the only reason I say that, and this is again teasing my Arizona pick for later, is that your point, I think Arizona is sort of breaking teams, or they're putting out the mold for how to beat teams. So that kind of teases what I think is going to probably happen with Arizona-Utah, but I think Colorado is going to get a game plan from Arizona. They're going to win this one, and then they're going to get to 6 wins against Utah next week.
Okay.
Yeah, our next game, we are skipping the Arizona-Utah game for now, so we'll get to that at the end. This is UCLA at USC, the city rivalry that will remain intact when they go to the Big Ten. UCLA is reeling now, and there was a report that came out this week that Chip Kelly is going to be fired after this game. I don't think there's been any substantial follow-up to that.
Tarmac. Just drive him to an airport,
freeway.
Leave him off.
He's going to be abandoned.
No, they got to take public transportation. You can't drive from USC to UCLA on the 110 right now because of that stuff with the 10. That fire that happened that shut down the 10 freeway right outside of downtown LA. Huge mess. So they're going to have to jump on the red line and go into Pasadena.
Yeah, and
USC.
USC's struggling too, of course, as we know. They're only 7-4. UCLA 6-4. This game is at 1:30 p.m. It is on ABC. Hopefully, they will wear their blue and maroon uniforms, or scarlet, or whatever the color they're calling it, which is a very cool color palette type of matchup. USC is favored in this game by 6 points, and I am going to take the Trojans to win and cover in this game. I think Caleb Williams is going to go off, and he's going to have 500 yards passing and 5 touchdowns. It's going to be like the final stamp that he's putting on this program. He's going to have an amazing game. UCLA is really in disarray, and their quarterback situation's kind of been all messed up. They had a terrible loss last week against ASU, and they were when we made our picks, they were 18-point favorites. I think it went down a little bit to 14 or so. Still, to lose that game against that team, the state that the Sun Devils were in, coming off that dreadful loss at Utah, I think this line's a little light. I think USC is going to win, and I think Chip Kelly might be in trouble.
I think Chip Kelly will be fired after this game. But I look at this matchup, and it's a rivalry game. I still think it will be close. You said it's a 6-point game?
6 points, yeah.
Oh, man. No, I'm going against. You're hearing my internal thoughts all being processed right now. I'm going to go with USC. I think it's still going to be a high-scoring game. That's one thing about USC is that even though they lose games, they still just figure out a way to put up pretty much 30 points. I think if UCLA can score at least 30 points, the Bruins will have a chance. It could potentially win this game. But like you said, Lev, their quarterback situation has been so wishy-washy. And the game being at the Coliseum, I know it doesn't matter much because it's the LA rivalry game, but I'm going to go with USC to win and barely cover.
Barely covers.
USC covers. All right. 7 or 10 points.
All right.
I have the exact same thing that you said, Lev. I think Caleb Williams, it's his last game in L.A., last game in a Trojan uniform. Last game he played for Oklahoma, dropped 50 on Oregon in a bowl game, top 15 Oregon team. I think he is going to play up to this challenge in the last game with USC and just dominate, and he will send Chip Kelly to another I don't know what network. He won't go back to Pac-12, but I think he was with Pac-12, maybe not.
Yeah. No, he was with Fox, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But send Chip Kelly back to television. At least
All
for
right,
a
we're
short
all on the
period of
same
time.
page so far in these two games, interestingly enough. Our next game is at 2 p.m. This game is on Fox. This has number 6 Oregon at Arizona State. The Ducks are 9-1. They're still alive and well for the Pac-12 championship game as well as the college football playoff. Arizona State bounced back in a big way from that dreadful performance at Utah and were able to pull off the upset against UCLA last week. Oregon is favored by 23.5 points in this game. That's a lot of points. It's
points.
just to me, it's just a situation. I mean, obviously Oregon is a better team than Arizona State. No question about it. But sometimes when those Northwest teams come down to the desert, like things just, I don't know. They don't come in and just roll.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm going to take Oregon to win the game, but ASU to beat the spread. I mean, I can see the final score being 40-20 or something of that nature, in which case you cash your ticket.
It's not Senior Day. That is next week when Arizona comes to town and plays the Sun Devils. So it is not the final home game for the Bourget Bros. But I will say this: ASU has played against tough teams, and they played them tough every single time. Outside of Utah, of course, in Salt Lake City. But, I mean, going on the road and taking Washington down to the wire, I got to say the Kenny Dillingham era is off to a very promising start because even though this roster isn't what it should be, Kenny Dillingham gets the most out of these guys. They fight. They have a lot of energy on both sides of the ball. So I'm going to go with ASU to lose. I think Oregon will win, but I got the Ducks to cover. I'll go with Oregon by 14 or 17 points.
ASU to cover, you mean?
ASU to cover, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Matchy. I say the same. I think Oregon's going to win. ASU covers or gets within the spread. You said something, Justin, and I'm not trying to just correct you, but you mentioned last possible game for
Trent Bourget.
Bourget. He's technically a redshirt junior. Do you think he stays? But he graduated in May, this past May. So could he transfer somewhere and get a starting job for a year?
Maybe.
I mean, because he's not going to. Jaden Rashad is going to be the guy. So.
As our unofficial or maybe official Bourget family reporter, Justin, you got to get on that.
No, I didn't mean that. I'm not trying to correct you on the air here. I just saw. I was looking at it literally as you said it, and I'm like, well, on his bio on the ASU website it says redshirt junior, which means he's in his 4th year. So you're not wrong that he's been there a long time.
He could be
it says he graduated in spring 2023.
Okay. He could be in his 5th year.
That's possible too because of COVID. And,
yeah.
So yeah, I think I like ASU. Something funny. So last week I was with Bruce at the Duke Arizona basketball game in Durham and listening to John Shire, 36 years old, talk. He talks like he's been coaching for 25 years.
He looks really young. I'm glad
to
hear that he's only 36.
He's 36. He looks young. I remember him as a player not that long ago. I mean, 12 years, 13 years. But like he talks like he's 50. He talks like he's been doing this a long time. One of my favorite things about Kenny Dillingham is he talks like he's just
like he's
800 miles an hour and
he's a frat boy kind of.
He talks
still,
like
right?
he's a junior trying to figure out where to spend his Sun Devil bucks after the practice, and I love it.
He looks like
I love it. It's not me ripping on him. I love it. There is no coaching of his mechanism for communicating. He just lets it fly, but it's not in the like. And I'm not trying to disparage a passed away person, but it's not in like the Mike Leach way or some of these guys that kind of can be harsh. It's really just like Mike Leach and some of these coaches let it rip, but in a way of like kind of being demeaning to people. That's not what he's doing. He's just letting it fly. Anything he's thinking comes flying out, and I absolutely love it. So that has nothing to do with it. I'll pick this team because of the color. Back to Ryan Finley, the Ryan Finley era on this podcast, but I think ASU loses, but covers.
Kenny D, man.
He's very enthusiastic. And when you play hard, that's good. That speaks to the culture.
And I want to make sure I'm clear. It's not unintelligible. Like he knows football. It's very clear. It's a completely different way of talking about what he's doing. Whereas we've talked about this with Jed Fish. I think Jed Fish knows every word that's coming out of his mouth, even when he hasn't heard a whole question. He knows every word that's coming out of his mouth 10 seconds before he says it.
Yep.
And it's this rolling process for him because he'll say things that are very like, okay, we heard that, and then we think it later and we go, he didn't say anything. But that's smart. That's not me picking on him. I think he's incredible.
That's from being in the NFL.
Yep.
Probably.
They're trained for that.
And a lawyer.
And a lawyer.
All that other stuff.
The big game, Cal at Stanford. Pac-12 networks, 4:30 p.m.
Can we just start calling it
Cal,
a big game?
Yeah. Cal was able to beat Washington State last week in a wild game, 42-39. Stanford, a lot of struggles in year one under Troy Taylor. Got absolutely demolished at Oregon State last week, 62-17. Cal is favored in this game by 6.5 at Stanford, and I am going the other way. I am taking Stanford to win the game outright. I don't have a great deal of analysis on this one. I just think it's a good value to take the points and figure I might as well just go all the way and take the Cardinal to win. Justin
Wilcox, I like him not because he shares the same name as me, but because he's a great football coach, and the dudes play hard for him. And I'm looking at their schedule right now, or their record, and they only have 6 losses, which means they're still in bowl contention. I got them winning on Saturday, beating the Stanford Cardinal, and then you look at their last game of the season
against UCLA,
UCLA after Chip Kelly has been fired, and the Bruins are reeling. So give me Cal to win the next couple weeks. You already got my picks for next week. Give me Cal the next couple weeks.
Exactly the same. I think Cal's going to win. I think they're also going to win next week against UCLA, and that puts 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Pac-12 teams into bowl games. So
Saying and so.
Maybe
Conference of Champions.
Maybe. Are you including Colorado and Washington State in that list? Because one of them's not going to make it, and then the other one would have to win again.
No, I think I'm including Colorado.
Yeah.
Okay.
ASU, Stanford, and Washington State.
Oh, that's right, because you already proclaimed that Colorado is going to beat Utah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nine bowl teams.
Sure.
From the Pac-12.
All right. This is the
I'm
real
a Pac-12 homer. I am not an Arizona homer.
This is the real big game. This is the biggest game of the week in college football. Really, it's Washington at Oregon State.
Real quick, I said Cal wins. I want to make sure Cal wins and covers.
Yep.
Okay.
I got you. Washington is ranked 5th. They are undefeated at 10-0. They haven't played great since the Oregon game, but they're finding a way to win every single week.
Are they really giving 2.5?
Oh, yeah, they are. No, the Oregon State is favored in this game by 2.5. Oregon State is ranked 11th. They're 8-2. As mentioned, they demolished Stanford last week. They're undefeated at home. They're really good at Reser Stadium. I think the reason they're favored in this game is because they're going to win. Oregon State is going to defeat Washington, so that's going to set up.
You do know what Arizona's chances of making the Pac-12 title game are. You're just playing coy.
Yeah.
Because that has to happen.
So Oregon State will you think they're messing things up a little bit. Not really. Washington and Oregon, I think, will both win next week. They'll go into the Pac-12 championship game, each with 1 loss, and the winner of that game will go to the college football playoff no matter what else happens around the country, because there's a lot of respect for the Pac-12 in this last season. But I am taking Oregon State. I think Washington's been kind of walking that tightrope lately, and they're finally going to fall off. And Oregon State is an awesome team at home, and they have the type of team that can give Washington trouble. They're very physical. They can run the ball. They can control the clock.
So if Oregon State wins this week, how does that set up the game formerly known as the Civil War? I'm not sure.
I was wrong, by the way, and I'm sorry for jumping in and cutting you off, Michael. I was wrong. I was thinking
it's the other way around.
Yeah, it's the Oregon State being Oregon is a bigger deal for the Pac-12 chaos for the Pac-12 championship. Yeah,
that game,
beating Washington doesn't.
The game formerly known as the Civil War is on Friday, November 24th, the day after Thanksgiving. It's at Autzen Stadium. There's already a line out for it, actually. Oregon by 11.5. So, I mean, Oregon State has an opportunity to mess it up for everybody if they were to win both of these games. I just think that's a lot. That's a lot to ask. And I think this is the one they're going to win.
Michael Penix wants to go to New York, right? You got to, if you want to be a Heisman finalist, you got to have Heisman moments. And that means going into tough road environments. When I say tough road environment, I mean not because it's rowdy or it's, too crazy, overwhelming, but it's very tough to play at Oregon State, especially if you're a top 10 team. Heck, Lev, you were there when USC and the almighty Trojans lost to the Beavers in Corvallis a long time ago. So I'm going to go with Washington to win. And Oregon State's favored, so I got Washington to win straight out.
Justin, you called me I don't know, it was like a week ago, and we were talking about the possibility of this weekend and what the potential for College game day to be in Tucson was. And Utah would have had to win last week, would have had to beat Washington, right?
Yeah.
That would have had to have happened, and it could have very well been a possibility. But there were 2 games ahead of it in terms of the possible rankings. This was one of them, and would have been a perfect opportunity for ESPN to shut down a narrative that I don't really believe, but they don't do a good job of getting away from, that they wanted the Pac-12 to die, that they don't care about the Pac-12, that they support things like what Pat McAfee said and all that stuff. By going to this game, which is by no debate the biggest game in the country this week and matters the most because of Oregon State's ability to beat Washington and take them out of a potential playoff position. But they chose to go to James Madison, who's not eligible for a bowl game, playing against a 6-4 Appalachian State team who they're going to go to a bowl game, but in this realm has not been this relevant since beating Michigan 15 years ago.
Weird decision.
And
by the way,
I get it, but I also think it's absolute cowardice by ESPN to not go to Reeser and to not amplify that Washington State's had a bad fall off, understandably, but that these 2 programs are still good for college football. So none of that matters. Game day's not here. It's not at Reeser Stadium, but it's still the game of the week easily. I'm going to take Washington. I think Washington wins. That obviously means they cover since they're not favored, which is wild. But I do think Washington's going to go into not just the next week in the Apple Cup, but into the Pac-12 championship unbeaten. But I think Oregon State's going to give them a fight. I'm probably looking at local bias by saying this. I was not impressed with Oregon State against Arizona. I did not see the top 11 team in the country, or if they win this, top 8 team in the country. Like, I just didn't. All over the place. Like, good athletes and good players. And that's probably not giving Arizona enough credit, but that's the closest, obviously, we've seen them. So I just think of those 2 teams, Washington has more, significantly more.
Yeah. By the way, that game is at 5:30 p.m. and it is on the ESPN family of networks on ABC. I don't know if Kirk Herbstreit is calling that game, but it sure would have been a lot easier for him if they did game day there and he could have just stayed in Corvallis instead of having to fly across the country, which he often has to do. Yep. Okay. Last game. Number 22 Utah at number 17 Arizona. Arizona is favored by 1 point in this game, so basically a pick 'em. It is a 12:30 p.m. kickoff. It's on Pac-12 networks. You asked me on the radio earlier today, Justin, who I'm taking. I take Arizona. Just kind of riding the momentum. I think they have proved that they can win this type of game, the type of game that they haven't been able to win before. And if you're looking for some incentive for Arizona, still alive for the Pac-12 championship game, haven't beaten Utah since 2015, senior day, all those things add up to a close, hard-fought Arizona victory.
The last time Arizona beat Utah, period, was in 2015, which was a pretty crazy game. The game went into double overtime. Yep. Will Parks became a Jimmy Kimmel moment when the referee turned around and Will Parks went over and tapped the referee on the shoulder. Well, because the referee tapped Will Parks on the shoulder pretty much like, all right, guys, let's have a good game. Let's have a good overtime. And Will Parks turns around, touches the ref on the shoulder. It became a viral moment. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's pretty funny.
It's great.
It's been a while since Arizona's beaten Utah. And it's been a while since Arizona has been, in terms of like the point spread, relatively close to Utah. I mean, you look at the past spreads, and Utah has been huge favorites going into the game, and they've dominated the Wildcats. Things are different with Jed Fish in year 3. So the Wildcats have proven time and time again that there doesn't really seem to be a letdown situation. Like I feel like we keep talking about it like we're anticipating it, and then it just hasn't happened.
Last week was the letdown.
It didn't happen,
and they found a way. And they found a way to win the game. You know, so I don't see one here.
I got Arizona. I got Arizona winning 34-31, the same exact score as the Colorado game.
Not to always jump around, which I do, but just to be clear, Kirk Herbstreit, Chris Fowler, and Holly Rowe are in Corvallis. So
could have made things lunacy. So much easier for Kirk.
Well, just how about your company that's bleeding money? Just put everybody there and make it simple, and not be flying private jets around the world. But hey, James Madison's a good story. Go Jordan McLeod. I don't get it. There's no other game on the schedule that makes any sense. Georgia State at LSU, Florida at Missouri. Okay, maybe, But
I mean, I think Georgia-Tennessee was in contention, then Tennessee totally bombed last week against
but
Missouri.
I don't think it's on. No, I'm just saying for them to call. I don't mean for game day. I mean for him to call that night. Looking at the ESPN games, there's three options, and it's those three. It's Washington, Oregon State, the Appalachian State James Madison game, ESPN Plus. So we can all get Big 12 ready and watch James Madison Appalachian State this weekend on ESPN.
We can do a whole podcast on ESPN Plus and then ESPN going direct to consumer, how that's going to impact Arizona future broadcast. But anyway,
Arizona wins.
Arizona wins. All right.
And breaks Utah in the process, and Utah loses to Colorado. And ASU fans on Twitter, love y'all, but you can stop acting like, well, Arizona's wins aren't that impressive anymore because ASU just beat UCLA, who Arizona beat. And Arizona was all right and high over that, and ASU stinks. It's our own fans saying that. Like, no, there is something to be said about week after week exposing a team's weaknesses and giving everyone a blueprint for the following week. No one's done that to Arizona yet. That's the interesting thing. Even Washington, even USC, and even Mississippi State, it didn't happen. That has not happened.
Well, yeah, there's a blueprint to beating Arizona.
There is.
It happened.
Have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and go into double overtime.
Twice.
Washington
too. I mean, Penix maybe, but like,
It happened in 2019 when in the second half against Washington, they blitzed the crap out of Khalil Tate. And Arizona was like never the same for like, multiple seasons.
Years and multiple coaches.
Like they broke. That was I always say it. That was like Buster Douglas knocking out Mike Tyson that moment. So the first 4 games we are a consensus, and then the last 2 games will decide, who's in first place heading into the final week of the regular season.
Interesting stuff. All right. That is it for this week's episode of the Wildcast podcast. Subscribe, rate, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're going out to the game on Saturday, again, be mindful. There's a lot of things going on in Tucson that morning. El Torte, Tucson always backs up traffic, so be mindful of that. And if you're not going to the game, you can find all of our coverage on the Wildcats on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app. Thanks for listening.